sometimes the funniest thing to say is mean. So I say a lot of mean things. But you guys gotta remember, I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm saying it because it's funny. And everything's funny till it happens to you.
What makes Dave Chappelle so funny? This seems like a silly question to ask, given that Chappelle is one of the most prolific comedians of all time, praised by virtually every modern-day comedian worth their weight.
Hey man, Dave Chappelle is the baddest person to touch a microphone that's alive right now.
He's very important. He's one of the most important figures in the history of comedy.
Dave's a beast, man. That's the only man that puts a little fear in my heart. I'm like, okay,
It's real.
what's he doing?
From his big break following the success of Chappelle's Show, to his roles in various films, and his success as a stand-up comic, Chappelle is a juggernaut in the world of humor. So what is it about Chappelle's style that makes him such a prescient voice in comedy? People will likely point to things like his unique comedic voice, the structure of his writing, his conversational delivery of jokes, or his mastery of timing akin to a jazz musician.
It took us 400 years to figure out as a people that white people's weakness the whole time was kneeling during their national anthem.
But I think there's an aspect of Dave's comedy that lies in the background of his masterful use of comedic principles, something that sets him apart from the titans of comedy, past and present. And I think it's his manipulation of empathy. What do I mean by this? Let's take a look at one of his jokes.
Good people of Atlanta, we must never forget that Anthony Bourdain killed himself.
So this is Chappelle's first joke from his 2019 Netflix special, Sticks and Stones. A really great video from the Nerd Writer from a few years back dealt with comedy and the role that joke tellers have in investigating morality. If you haven't already seen it, the video suggests that comedians are uniquely poised to serve as moral detectives. And much like we permit detectives in cliche crime dramas to act outside the law to do what's right, we, as a society, permit comedians to touch on subjects we consider wrong in order to arrive at a greater truth. But as true as this is, bringing up the recent death of a beloved celebrity as the first joke in your set kinda seems like a bridge too far, even for a comedian like Dave Chappelle. But let's examine this joke.
Good people of Atlanta, we must never forget that Anthony Bourdain killed himself.
We begin with a recollection of the tragic death of chef and TV personality Anthony Bourdain in June of 2018, a death that shocked nearly everyone familiar with his work, particularly because of the joy Bourdain brought to everyone through his TV show and off-screen endeavors, and his ostensibly charmed life.
Anthony Bourdain had the greatest job that show business ever produced. This flew around the world and ate delicious meals with outstanding people. That man hung himself in a luxury suite in France.
And just as he begins to touch on the bewildering circumstances of Bourdain's death, Chappelle alleviates the tension with,
They say 2000 party over, oops, out of time. So tonight I'm gonna party like it's 1999.
Dave Chappelle is known for his comedic timing, and the placement of nearly every word in his jokes seems to be deliberate in order to maximize his audience's engagement. The timing of this tangent is absolutely beautiful. If we viewed the set of words preceding this musical interlude in a vacuum, the next logical thing to talk about, considering Bourdain had what most would call a dream job, would be to remark on how heartbreaking the circumstance of his death is, and that life is precious, and we must value our time while we're still here. And in the most genius way, Dave does this. Prince's 1999 is a song frankly obsessed with the end of life, with crazed, fearful lyrics juxtaposed with an upbeat, catchy melody. Released in the early 80s, 1999 reflects how the doomsday clock, a metaphorical depiction of mankind's proximity to extinction, was set to 4 minutes to midnight in 1981. Meaning that global annihilation was paramount. The song implores the listener to cherish life while alive, because
They say 2000 1,000.
So, instead of continuing with the somber nature of the tragedy of Bourdain, Chappelle starts to sing. And this serves two purposes. One, to ease the tension of the joke's premise by singing a catchy song that everybody knows. And two, subliminally introduce the commentary he wants to make. Without ever saying it, he puts the idea of cherishing life into the minds of the audience. Absolutely brilliant. We then transition to a personal story about a person Dave knew growing up.
I knew a in high school that was an urban genius. This motherfucker's grades were so good, he got all the way from the hood to an Ivy League school with a full scholarship.
Now, it's a well-known trope that stand-up comedians lie when they tell a first-hand story during a joke.
I was at a bar the other night, doesn't matter where because I'm lying, but
whether or not the story he tells is true, and it probably isn't, Dave references a trope here, specific enough to seem personal to him, yet common enough to relate to the audience.
From there, the motherfucker got himself into one of the best law schools in the country. And when he was in law school, he met a woman, and they fell in love, and they were gonna get married. And I told him, I said, my man, save that bitch for later in your life.
I think we've all known someone who began a relationship with someone during an inopportune time in their life. And as a friend, you probably knew it wasn't going to last. It's these subtle messages of relatability that earn Dave an unspoken bond with his audience, and it increases the gravitas of his jokes.
He married her, and sadly, they got divorced while he was in law school. This man had nothing, and that bitch took half of that.
The first thing to notice here is another example of Dave's impeccable timing. Dave knows exactly when to use that rapid-fire, fast-talking candor that he's known for, but he also knows when to pause and allow his quips the anticipation they deserve. It's in these moments that Dave plays his audience like a fiddle.
This man had nothing, and that bitch took half of that.
The second thing to notice is the additional layer of relatability given to the premise. Dave elaborates on just how far his friend has fallen from his former glory, starting with the highest level of potential and sinking to rock bottom.
2 years ago, I was home in D.C. doing some shopping, trying to buy my sons some socks at Foot Locker. I go to Foot Locker, guess who's the manager? That dressed like a referee, the whole shit. This motherfucker is 45 years old. And he told me, he said he's been living with his mother for like 10 years, just trying to get back on his feet.
The choice of referencing a situation like this, seeing a high school friend in less than ideal circumstances, is an incredibly effective narrative device. I think everyone has been in this position, encountering someone from the past and being surprised and saddened if they've fallen on hard times. This sets a perfect stage for the eventual punchline.
But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is, never occurred to this to kill himself. I even suggested to him that he should try it out. Like, I don't know, he might.
And like magic, Dave ties up his joke with a bow. It's in this punchline that he delivers a hilarious end to a twisting, winding road of a joke, touching on the tragic death of a celebrity, inserting a musical interlude, and a seemingly personal story. And at the end, Dave, through an irreverent set of premises, delivers a poignant message about humanity. Depression is not a phase. And even more importantly, depression falls on people that we don't expect.
Nobody's life is perfect. No matter what it looks like from the outside, you don't know what the fuck's going on inside.
By contrasting Bourdain's tragic death with the unfortunate circumstances of his personal story, Dave delivers this message without ever directly spelling it out, something daunting for any comedian. And by the end, the audience realizes the gravity of inner psychological turmoil and depression, and how these demons don't spare even the most beloved and successful people. I think Dave weaved the joke like this because he wants to reinforce the idea of our shared humanity and how we should always strive to display empathy for one another. And I think this unique and tangible quality of emotional manipulation sets Dave apart from his contemporaries. Though this may not be the first thing that comes to mind when discussing his comedy, I think this plays a vital role in Dave's singular and profound approach to stand-up.
Chappelle is just different, man. Like, he cannot be copied.
Anyone who's a fan of Dave's work knows that Dave spares no one and nothing from being joked about. He equally applies pressure to different ethnicities, political ideologies, sexual orientations, genders, creeds, mantras, and everything in between. And I mean, no one is safe. Because of this, people could infer that Dave is mean-spirited, or Dave Chappelle doesn't give a fuck. On the contrary, I think this is wildly uncharitable to Dave as a comedian and as a person. There's the obvious stuff, like Dave's advocacy for political and social movements, philanthropy, and most directly, his recent performance dedicated almost entirely to the murder of George Floyd. In addition to my usual sort of research for this video, I rewatched every Dave Chappelle special, even his unreleased sets. If I take a step back and look at the entirety of all of his jokes, there's an absurd amount of diversity. As I said earlier, no one is safe, and no topic is sacred. But if you look at the construction of his jokes, even the ones that poke fun at a certain person or demographic, they're often embedded with a premise that reinforces the idea that the audience should be aware of the empathy associated with the joke's premise.
Is this a time in American history when an American can make a decision for themselves, and even though other Americans don't understand it, they'll support it and let this person live a happy life? Is this what's happening? If it is, then good for America. That's Dave Chappelle, the American.
Wait a minute. Just because I'm dressed this way does not make me a whore. Which is true. Gentlemen, that is true. Just because they dress a certain way doesn't mean they are a certain way. Don't ever forget it. But ladies, you must understand that that is fucking confusing.
Of all the comedians I listen to, I think Dave Chappelle is the only one that wields empathy masterfully and gracefully. His jokes can be hard-hitting, but more often than not, the intent behind the joke seems to be deliberately created to encourage his audience to revel in our shared humanity. His approach to comedy is unique in that he subtly touches on his desire to relate to both his audience and the subjects of his jokes, making his commentary feel genuine and poignant.
If you're in a group that I made fun of, then just know that I probably will only make fun of you if I see myself in you.
Dave jokes about depression and inner turmoil because, well, he's experienced depression and inner turmoil. He can poke fun at marginalized groups because he himself has been marginalized. And his commentary feels as if his ultimate goal is for humanity to laugh at his jokes and to care a bit more about each other. Comedy is truly a powerful tool for cultivating empathy, and I don't think there's a comedian doing it better than Dave Chappelle. Although as insightful as he truly is, Rick James is definitely his finest work.
I'm Rick James, bitch. Enjoy yourself.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. Huge thank you to Alex from High Top Films and Ben from Canada for helping me with the early drafts of this video. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see y'all next time. This is Johnny the Lone Chemist, signing off.